As night settles in, the cicadas sing, and the small wooden house glows softly with lantern light. You lie down, mind spinning with ideas, eyes tracing the shapes of wheels and engines in the shadows. The world outside may be humble, imperfect, and slow, but inside your head, it's a place where a boy can tinker, dream, and prepare to take the first steps toward changing everything. The beginnings are humble, yes, but the ideas are anything but. You've just received your first real bicycle, a delicate thing with wobbly handlebars and squeaky pedals, a machine that feels both magical and terrifying in your small, calloused hands. The wooden floorboards creak beneath your feet as you lift it out into the sunlight, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the ever-present scent of rice from breakfast. You wonder briefly if anyone else in the village feels as nervous as you do, standing in front of a contraption that promises freedom, but also very real pain if misused. You swing your leg over the saddle, wobble, and immediately realize that gravity is not your friend. The bike tilts dramatically, threatening to dump you into the dirt with all the grace of a clumsy goat. You clutch the handlebars like they are lifelines, your fingers sticky from the morning's miso soup still lingering in the air. A neighbor passing by raises an eyebrow. You give a small wave, but it probably reads more like a plea for help. Pedaling begins slowly, one awkward push at a time. The bike creaks in protest. The wheels wobble like jelly, and the chain squeaks mournfully. You imagine it singing a tiny lament. Why hast thou betrayed me, O awkward boy? You pedal faster, trying to maintain control, and immediately realize that speed and balance are a tricky combination. You swerve, narrowly avoiding a chicken that hisses like it has been personally offended by your existence. Your first crash is spectacular. You topple sideways, roll into a pile of straw, and emerge covered in dust, grass, and a faint sense of existential despair. The bike lies nearby, looking smug in a way only inanimate objects can manage. You sit up, inspect yourself for injuries, and notice a scraped elbow and a knee that feels suspiciously like it's plotting revenge. Yet despite the pain, you smile. This is learning. This is curiosity. This is the thrill of discovering the limits of human coordination. After a few more attempts, you begin to experiment. You notice that shifting your weight slightly to the left stabilizes the bike. Leaning too far forward sends you face first into a pile of dirt. You adjust the pedals, wiggle the chain, and wonder if adding a small motor might prevent some of the chaos. Ideas tumble in your head faster than your pedals ever could. Maybe a tiny engine, a better brake system, a handlebar that sings when you turn it. It all seems plausible, necessary, and slightly brilliant. The neighbors watch with a mixture of horror and amusement. Mr. Tanaka shakes his head, muttering about reckless youth, while Mrs. Sato peers out from behind the rice paper doors, clutching her apron as if it could somehow shield you from gravity. You pay them little mind. Your focus is on the machine, the physics, the infinitesimal adjustments that make balance possible. Each wobble teaches something new. Each scrape is a tiny medal of insight. By afternoon, you're riding with more confidence, though still punctuated by the occasional tumble. You pedal past the garden, narrowly missing the carrots your mother is cultivating. A small dog chases you, barking, as though challenging the very notion of speed. You laugh, wind in your hair, the world spinning slightly off kilter but thrillingly alive. You can feel the spark of possibility. This is more than just a bicycle. This is the beginning of understanding motion, mechanics, and the beauty of engineering through trial and error. Evening falls, and you park the bicycle carefully against the house, inspecting it for dents and bends. Your hands are black with grease, your knees patched with rice paper bandages your mother applied with loving exasperation. You lie down on the tatami mat thinking about all the improvements you could make. A lighter frame, smoother pedals, stronger brakes, a motor that hums like a small cat. The world of possibilities feels enormous, yet entirely within reach. And as you drift towards sleep, you realize something crucial. Falling off, getting dirty, failing spectacularly. It's all part of the adventure. Every mishap is a lesson, every bruise a reminder that curiosity is worth the temporary pain. You imagine future bicycles, motorcycles, and engines, humming with precision, speed, and life. The first bicycle mishaps are over, but the journey has only begun, and your dreams are already spinning faster than the wheels beneath you. One evening, the faint smell of burning oil drifts from the workshop. You sneak closer, curiosity bubbling like tea over a tiny flame. Inside, your father leans over a small engine, sparks flying as if tiny fireworks have been trapped in metal. You freeze, mesmerized, as a tiny spark lands on the floor and sizzles. It smells vaguely like toasted miso and adventure. This, you realize, is not just an engine. It is a portal to possibility. The workshop is dimly lit, the flickering shadows making every tool look slightly more mysterious than it is. Wrenches hang from the walls like soldiers at attention, greasy and gleaming. Chains dangle from hooks, gently swaying as if nodding their approval. You step closer, careful not to trip over a stray bolt or disturb the precarious pile of scrap metal. Each piece seems alive, whispering promises. Touch me, bend me, understand me. Your father notices you peeking and grunts, half warning, half encouragement. Don't get your fingers caught, he says. You nod solemnly, but your eyes never leave the engine. The hum of the motor, the faint puff of smoke, the smell of oil and hot metal. It's intoxicating. You imagine the possibilities, a bicycle that moves itself, a tiny cart that can climb hills without a human pushing it, perhaps even a machine that can carry people faster than their own legs allow. You inch closer, inspecting the engine like a detective examining a particularly suspicious crime scene. Every bolt, every gear, every small moving part is fascinating. You wonder how they interact, why one moves when another does, and whether adding a small lever here or a spring there could make it run smoother, faster, or maybe even purr like a cat. Each thought sends a tiny thrill through your body. You are no longer just a boy in Hamamatsu. You are an inventor, an engineer, a tiny god of motion. Hours pass unnoticed. Your mother calls for dinner, but you barely register it. The world has shrunk to the size of that small engine and the endless possibilities contained within its metal shell. Sparks fly occasionally, startling you, but never enough to scare you away. Instead, each tiny explosion of light feels like a secret handshake from the universe, telling you that curiosity is a good companion, that tinkering is a path worth exploring, and that engines are alive in ways most people fail to notice. You imagine the engine running freely, carrying bicycles uphill, powering carts through the village streets, or even propelling yourself faster than anyone else could dream. The ideas spin faster than the gears themselves. You picture tiny wheels, small motors, and a world transformed by the simple joy of mechanical motion. The notion is thrilling and absurd all at once, because who would imagine that a boy obsessed with scraps and bolts could someday change the way millions move? Night falls, and the workshop grows quieter. Shadows stretch long and thin, and the flickering light makes the engine seem almost magical. You sit cross-legged on the floor, gently spinning a gear between your fingers, imagining what happens if you connect it to a wheel, a lever, or a small cart. You picture the reactions of neighbours who will watch these contraptions come to life, suspicious at first, then curious, and eventually amazed. Even as the stars appear in the sky, twinkling with distant possibilities, you realize something important. Curiosity is not just about questions, it is about daring to touch, to experiment, to risk failure in pursuit of understanding. The engine has taught you more than school ever could: patience, observation, and the thrilling beauty of discovery. And as you lie down later that night, the smell of oil lingering faintly in your hair, the hum of imagination still buzzing in your ears, you know one thing for certain: sparks are not dangerous if you follow them with care. Sometimes they are the first sign of something remarkable about to begin. And in that small workshop, with a tiny boy staring wide-eyed at a flickering engine, the spark of curiosity has ignited a lifetime of invention, adventure, and improbable brilliance. You sit at your small wooden desk in a dimly lit classroom, the faint scent of chalk dust mingling with the lingering aroma of rice from breakfast. The blackboard looms ahead, lines of neat kanji scratching across its surface like soldiers in formation. Your teacher's voice drones on, the syllables blending into a low, hypnotic hum that makes the mind wander almost involuntarily. You're supposed to be learning math and calligraphy, but your imagination has already packed a small suitcase and left the classroom entirely. Outside the window, the world hums with activity. A cart rattles down the street, the wheels squeaking in protest. A neighbour sweeps the porch, pausing occasionally to swat at a curious chicken. You watch it all, fascinated. How does the wheel on that cart stay upright? Why does the broom pivot so smoothly on its handle? Could a small modification here or there make life easier for someone? Your pencil hovers over your notebook, but instead of writing kanji, you sketch tiny gears, pulley systems, and what looks suspiciously like a motor attached to a bicycle. Your classmates are absorbed in their own tasks, some diligently copying from the board, others whispering about baseball games and the latest village gossip. One boy glances over at you and frowns, probably wondering why you are so engrossed in a notebook full of what looks like nonsense. You don't care. In your mind, equations are not just numbers. They are instructions, formulas for movement, blueprints for adventure. Multiplication tables are just a warm-up for talk calculations. The teacher calls your name. You blink and respond vaguely, nodding like a responsible student, but your attention immediately returns to a diagram of a small engine you've sketched in the margin. You imagine it spinning, humming, carrying a bicycle uphill without the rider pedaling, a minor miracle in the making. The bell has not yet rung, and yet in your mind recess has already begun, a world full of gears, wheels and motion waiting to be explored. You daydream about attaching an engine to everything you see. The teacher's wooden pointer could be a lever in a massive machine. The desks themselves could rotate like cogs in a clock, carrying students silently to their lessons. Even the ink-stained walls have potential, maybe as pulleys or panels in a larger contraption that no one else could imagine. You wonder if anyone else notices the universe humming with mechanical possibility, or if you are the only one attuned to its secret rhythms. Lunchtime arrives, and the smell of rice and pickled vegetables fills the room. Your classmates eat dutifully, talking about ordinary things, the weather, chores, gossip. You, however, are calculating. How many rotations of the spoon in miso soup equals one revolution of a bicycle wheel? Could the chopsticks be used to adjust a chain or tighten a bolt? These are important questions, though no one else seems to care. You tuck your calculations into your sleeve for safekeeping, a secret treasure trove of mechanical insight. Afternoon lessons pass in a similar haze. The sounds of chalk on the board, the rustle of paper, and the occasional cough from a classmate become a rhythmic backdrop for your imagination. You sketch quietly, letting gears turn in your mind as the teacher talks about history or literature. You imagine steam engines in the villages you've never visited, bicycles racing down hills, and carts carrying small children without effort. Each thought is a small adventure, and each sketch brings the vision one step closer to reality. As the school day ends, you gather your things and step outside. The sun warms the streets, illuminating the uneven stones and swaying gardens. Your classmates chatter and race home, but you linger, studying a bicycle wheel abandoned against the fence. You twist it, examine the hub, and imagine how it could be better, lighter, smoother, faster. The daydreams have not ended. They have merely shifted to a new canvas. And as you walk home, mind spinning with ideas, you realize something quietly profound. School is less about the lessons taught and more about the curiosity it sparks. The world is full of problems waiting for solutions, and even a boy who struggles to sit still can discover them. One sketch, one thought, one daydream at a time. It is 1946, and the world around you begins to tremble in ways that feel both terrifying and oddly alive. You are in Hamamatsu, Japan, and suddenly the floorboards shift beneath your feet like a boat on restless water. The walls creak in protest, and dust drifts from the rafters in tiny clouds, as if the house itself is sighing in discomfort. Outside, the streets ripple like waves frozen in time, and every sound, barking dogs, clattering pots, distant cries, mixes into a symphony of chaos. You grab hold of the nearest solid thing, which happens to be your father's bicycle repair bench, and it shudders violently under your grip. The smell of burning oil and dust fills your nose, a mixture both alarming and strangely familiar. You glance around, your heart racing. The neighbours are emerging from their homes, eyes wide, shouting at each other over the din. A cart topples, spilling bundles of firewood that bounce and scatter across the street. Somewhere, a cat leaps in slow motion, likely plotting revenge for the noise. For a moment, the world is upside down, sideways, and spinning all at once. You clutch the edges of a door frame as if it might anchor the universe, and for a second it almost does. The trembling subsides slightly, only to surge again, reminding you that the ground is no longer predictable, no longer safe, no longer anything like the calm streets you've known since childhood. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of fear mix with the tiniest spark of curiosity. How does the earth move like this? And what could possibly be learned from it? After the shaking stops, the village is unrecognizable. Wooden houses lean at odd angles, roofs sag, and fences are knocked askew. Dust hangs in the air like fog, softening the edges of chaos into something almost dreamlike. The neighbours move carefully, stepping over broken roof tiles and scattered belongings. You notice the beauty hidden in the destruction, the way sunlight falls on twisted wood, the way shadows dance across fractured walls, the tiny sprouts of grass that somehow survive amid the rubble. Your father surveys the damage to his workshop, rubbing his forehead and muttering about lost tools and bent wheels. Yet even amidst disaster, there is resilience. People begin to clear paths, salvage what they can, and rebuild immediately, because in this world, waiting is dangerous and futile. You watch him, fascinated by the efficiency of repair and the quiet determination that keeps life moving, even when the earth itself seems intent on proving otherwise. You wander through the debris carefully, stepping over splintered wood and broken tiles, imagining how each displaced object could be repurposed. That fallen roof tile could become part of a small stove. That twisted metal pipe might serve as a lever or a handle. Even the remnants of a broken bicycle wheel hint at future ideas, future engines, future motion. Where others see ruin, you see potential, and the same spark of curiosity that drove you to tinker with scraps now nudges you to consider reconstruction as another form of invention. As evening falls, the air is thick with dust, sweat, and the faint smell of burned wood. Lanterns light up the village, casting warm circles of gold on streets that still feel unsteady beneath your feet. You sit quietly on a broken bench, examining a wheel that survived the quake, turning it slowly in your hands. It spins imperfectly, wobbling slightly, but it moves, and that movement feels miraculous. You realize that survival, like invention, requires patience, observation, and the courage to keep going even when the world shakes beneath you. Night descends, and the village is quiet now except for occasional murmurs of reconstruction. You lie down on the tatami mats of your partially repaired home, dust on your clothes, hands blackened from handling debris. Your thoughts wander to engines, gears, and possibilities. If the earth can shift so violently and life can continue, then perhaps your ideas too can survive setbacks, crashes, and failures. Perhaps one day they will move the world in ways you cannot yet imagine. And as your eyes close, the faint rumble of the distant earth still echoes in your mind, a gentle reminder that the world is unpredictable, resilient, and full of surprises. From chaos comes ingenuity, from trembling comes determination, and from this boy's curiosity comes the quiet, persistent spark that will one day ignite into brilliance. The workshop smells like oil, metal, and a hint of something burnt that nobody wants to identify. It's late, the kind of late where the world feels half asleep and half plotting against you. You crouch over a bicycle engine, fingers greasy, shirt streaked with dark stains, thinking, this is where the magic happens. Your father sleeps upstairs, snoring softly, completely unaware that you're conducting experiments that may or may not involve small explosions. The lamp flickers, casting uneven light over wrenches, bolts, and bits of metal that seem to multiply in the shadows. You pick up a small screwdriver, weighing it like a sword before battle. The engine hums quietly in your imagination, demanding attention. Every bolt you twist, every gear you nudge, is a conversation with a machine that doesn't talk back, but somehow communicates perfectly. Sparks fly sometimes, literally, and you leap back with a startled yelp, only to realize the engine wasn't offended, just enthusiastic. Outside, the streets are silent except for the occasional bark of a dog or the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Inside, time moves differently. Minutes stretch into hours, and hours feel like minutes. You experiment with tiny modifications, a chain that moves smoother, a lever that tightens with less effort, a spark plug that glows like a tiny sun. The smell of hot metal and oil mingles with the quiet hum of your thoughts, a soothing, hypnotic combination that makes the world shrink to the size of this little workshop. Sometimes you fail spectacularly. A bolt slips, a spring flies across the room, or the engine refuses to start for reasons that seem both profound and absurd. You pause, wipe sweat from your brow, and consider whether the floor is plotting against you. It probably is. Then with a quiet laugh, you pick up the pieces and start again. Failure is just another step toward understanding, like learning to walk, only louder and slightly more flammable. Your hands are blackened, your nails filled with grime, but they feel alive in a way that clean hands never could. Each scratch and cut is a badge of honor, proof that you engaged fully with the machine rather than just staring at it longingly. You imagine the gears spinning faster than your thoughts, chains tightening perfectly, a bicycle that hums like a purring cat instead of groaning like a cranky old man. Occasionally, you pause to examine a part, holding it up to the lamp. Shadows stretch across the walls like conspirators plotting something magnificent. You twist, bend, and inspect, murmuring to yourself ideas for the next day. What if the lever were a little longer? What if the chain were lighter? What if the bicycle could carry 2 people, or even 3? The possibilities spin in your mind like the gears themselves, endless and tantalizing. By midnight, The workshop feels like a universe of its own. Outside, the moon glows softly, casting silver light through the window. Inside, the engines and bicycle parts form a quiet landscape, hills and valleys of mechanical possibility. You sit cross-legged, turning a small gear in your hand, and realize that the hours have passed unnoticed. You are tired, yes, but exhilarated. The dark has given you freedom. Freedom to tinker, to fail, to imagine without interruption or judgment. Finally, you lean back, stretching sore arms, and take a deep breath. The room smells of oil, sweat, and a faint hint of burnt metal. You imagine the machines of tomorrow, the engines that will hum on streets you have not yet walked, the bicycles that will carry people faster than they ever dreamed. And you smile quietly to yourself, knowing that every late night, every spark, every stubborn gear that refused to cooperate is part of a slow, steady journey towards something extraordinary. As you blow out the lamp and lie down in the small cot in the corner of the workshop, the faint hum of imagination still buzzing in your ears, you feel a strange comfort. The dark is no longer frightening. It is a companion, a canvas, and a playground. And tomorrow the wrenches will be waiting, the bolts eager to twist, and the spark of possibility will ignite once more. Motorcycles are loud. Motorcycles are dangerous. Motorcycles are, somehow, entirely irresistible. You first saw one on the streets of Hamamatsu, its engine growling like a small, impatient tiger. You were mesmerized. The wheels spun with a rhythm that seemed to whisper, "Come closer, touch me, imagine what I could do." And from that moment, you were obsessed. The first time you got near one, your fingers itched. You couldn't resist examining the handlebars, the pedals, the chain that pulsed with latent power. You turned it over gently, listening to every creak, every click, every tiny protest from the metal. The motorcycle didn't care that you were a boy with more curiosity than experience. It only offered itself up as a puzzle, a challenge, a promise. You began to tinker obsessively. Engines, chains, wheels. Nothing was safe from your hands. Sometimes sparks flew, sometimes smoke curled in odd little shapes, like miniature dragons escaping the exhaust. You laughed quietly, because danger is somehow more thrilling when you are sure nothing will actually kill you. And besides, what is obsession if not a tiny, socially unacceptable form of genius? Neighborhood children watched with fascination and fear. They whispered that you would ruin the motorcycle or lose a limb. You ignored them. They didn't understand the symphony of gears, the poetry of pistons, the quiet rhythm that hums inside every engine. You could see potential where they only saw noise. Each bolt you adjusted, each lever you examined, was a step toward mastery. And mastery, you decided, might just be slightly addictive. You ride, or rather, you attempt to ride. The first attempts are chaotic. You wobble, you lurch, and sometimes the motorcycle lurches back as if to say, "Are you sure about this, kid?" A crash here, a scrape there, and a few startled chickens later, you begin to understand. Balance is not optional. The throttle must be respected, and the engine has a temper, but it responds to care, attention, and the occasional whispered apology. Your obsession spreads. Every spare moment is spent studying motorcycles, dismantling them, imagining new designs. You dream of engines that are lighter, faster, smoother. You imagine tiny modifications that could make the bike handle hills better, corners more gracefully, and perhaps even hum like a small, obedient beast rather than roar like a furious lion. The possibilities feel endless, exhilarating, slightly terrifying, and perfectly intoxicating. Sometimes you imagine motorcycles racing through distant landscapes. You see the wind whipping past, the streets unfolding like ribbons, the sun glinting off chrome. You imagine people leaning into corners with effortless skill, engines purring beneath them. Your sketches fill with tiny innovations, suspension tweaks, gear adjustments, fuel efficiency improvements. Each idea spins in your mind like a wheel in motion, a perpetual, beautiful loop of potential. Night often finds you in the workshop, engine parts scattered like confetti, your fingers black with grease, and a tiny spark of triumph every time a chain clicks just right. You listen to the hum of machines as if it were a lullaby, each vibration a note in the symphony of obsession. Sleep arrives reluctantly because the motorcycles live in your thoughts even as your body rests. They whisper possibilities, whisper freedom, whisper a promise that you are not just a boy playing with metal, you are a creator, a tinkerer, a future engineer of movement. By morning, the obsession has not waned. The first rays of sun glint off your sketches, your tools, and the small motorcycles scattered across the yard. You stretch, rub your hands, and approach a bike with the quiet reverence of someone about to talk to a very old friend. Your curiosity is patient, persistent, and unrelenting. It's not just a phase. It is, you realize, a calling. And so, day after day, the motorcycles call to you. Their engines whisper, their chains beckon, and you answer without hesitation. You tinker, adjust, fall, laugh, and dream. Because obsession, when it is fueled by curiosity and imagination, becomes something beautiful. And you are already on the path to turning that beauty into motion that the entire world will one day notice. It is a quiet afternoon in the workshop, though quiet here is relative. The faint hum of imagination vibrates in the air, mixed with the smell of oil, metal, and the lingering hint of burnt wires from yesterday's experiments. You are hunched over your latest creation, a contraption that is equal parts genius, chaos, and optimism. This is it, the first real prototype of what might one day become something extraordinary. The frame is small and slightly crooked, the wheels uneven, and the engine stubbornly refusing to start on command. But in your mind, it is perfect. You run your fingers along the metal, feeling every groove, every dent, every tiny imperfection, as if it were a secret message waiting to be deciphered. The gears click when nudged, and the chain hums softly like it is trying to speak. It doesn't speak words, but you understand perfectly. Potential. You step back and examine the prototype from every angle. To anyone else, it might look like a pile of scrap metal, loosely held together with determination and audacity. To you, it is alive. You imagine the streets of Hamamatsu buzzing with contraptions like this, each one moving with purpose, each one a testament to the power of tinkering, curiosity, and a slight disregard for conventional wisdom. The first attempt at starting it is dramatic. You pull the lever, the engine sputters, coughs, and finally roars in a way that makes your heart leap. The prototype lurches forward, wobbles, and nearly tips over. You grab it just in time, arms trembling, but a grin spreads across your face. It moves. It actually moves. The dream that lived only in sketches and thoughts now exists in the physical world, wobbling, imperfect, and glorious. Neighbours peek through the fence, murmuring about the noise. A few shake their heads in disbelief. One elderly man mutters something about reckless youth, while a cat leaps away in indignation at the disturbance. You ignore them. You are occupied with small adjustments, tightening a bolt here, bending a lever there, coaxing the engine into smoother operation. Every tweak, every nudge feels like conversing with the prototype, negotiating a fragile truce between imagination and reality. Hours pass, though time feels elastic in the workshop. You experiment with speed, balance, and motion, occasionally falling off onto the soft earth and laughing at the absurdity of it all. Each stumble teaches something new. The weight distribution must shift slightly, the chain tension needs refinement, and the handlebars. while the handlebars are a constant source of philosophical debate. By evening, the prototype moves with a confidence that almost matches your own. Sunlight wanes, spilling golden light across the workshop. You lie down briefly, letting your hands rest, but your eyes are still fixed on the prototype. You imagine a future where these small engines are not just toys or curiosities, but machines that carry people, goods, and ideas. You picture streets filled with motion, humming engines, and the faint scent of oil mingling with hope. Your first prototype is a whisper of what is to come, a tiny proof that curiosity, patience, and obsession can shape the world. As night settles in, you carefully park the prototype in the corner of the workshop, wiping grease from your fingers. You step back, admiring it in the lantern light, noting every imperfection with pride. It is not perfect, but perfection is a concept for later. Tonight, it exists. Tonight, your imagination has been made tangible, wobbly wheels and all. And as you lie down on your tatami mat, listening to the soft hum of the village outside, the prototype seems almost alive in the shadows. You know tomorrow will bring adjustments, failures, new ideas. But for now, you drift towards sleep with a quiet thrill in your chest. The first prototype has proven one simple truth. Dreams, no matter how small or crooked, can move. The streets of Hamamatsu are quiet in the early morning, bathed in the soft gold of sunlight slipping through thin clouds. You mount your small prototype, fingers gripping the handlebars, heart thumping with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The wind whispers in your ears, as if aware that today is different. Today, you are not just tinkering, you are racing. Against nothing in particular, except perhaps gravity. Gravity's cousins, friction and chaos, and most importantly, your own wild imagination. The first push is tentative. You wobble, the wheels protesting under your weight. Dust rises from the uneven stones, curling around your feet like miniature clouds. The engine hums in protest, or maybe encouragement, it's hard to tell. You adjust, lean slightly forward, and suddenly you are moving. Faster than you expected, faster than you thought possible. The wind wraps around your cheeks, tangling your hair, and you feel an intoxicating sense of liberation. The prototype is alive, and you are part of its heartbeat. The neighbours peek from windows and doorways, a mixture of awe, horror, and curiosity painted across their faces. A cat darts across your path, narrowly avoiding your wheels, its tail puffed in indignation. You laugh quietly, gripping the handlebars tighter, imagining that the cat is silently judging your mechanical genius. Somewhere, a dog barks, though whether in warning or encouragement is unclear. Either way, the world feels alive, pulsing with motion, and you are at the centre. The streets stretch ahead, uneven and unpredictable. You learn quickly that the wind is not merely a companion, it is a teacher. Lean too far into a turn, and the wind scoffs, nudging you toward the soft dirt. Pedal too hard, and the engine whines like a small, offended beast. Every wobble, every squeak, every sudden lurch is a lesson in balance, patience, and the delicate negotiation between boy and machine. You adjust, adapt, and eventually find a rhythm that feels almost like dancing. Somewhere, along the way, you imagine racing against the wind itself. The air seems to push back, teasing you with its invisible fingers. You lean, push, and pedal, feeling every rotation of the wheels translate into motion that is equal parts thrill and absurdity. A tiny flap of paper catches in the wheel and spins madly. You wonder if it has thoughts, and if so, whether it is impressed by your audacity. Every obstacle, pebbles, stray branches, curious cats, becomes part of the grand, unpredictable course of your race. Laughter bubbles up from your chest, uncontrollable, as you realize how small and large the world feels at once. The prototype wobbles, the engine hums, the wind roars. Everything conspires to make you pay attention, to be alive, to notice the poetry hidden in motion. You imagine future versions, smoother, faster, more powerful, but for now, the imperfect, wobbly, squeaky marvel beneath you is enough. It carries dreams, curiosity, and a hint of reckless bravery down the quiet streets. Hours could have passed, or maybe only minutes. Time has become irrelevant. You coast to a stop under a small cherry tree, the petals fluttering lazily around your head. Your breath comes in soft bursts, fingers sticky with grease, and cheeks warm from wind and exhilaration. The prototype is quiet now, humming softly in the sunlight, as if proud of its performance. You pat the handlebars gently, acknowledging the machine's cooperation in this tiny adventure. As evening falls, you walk the prototype back to the workshop, mind still buzzing with possibilities. Each turn of the wheel has taught something new. A shift in balance, a better chain alignment, a smoother throttle. The prototype has been more than a machine today. It has been a teacher, a partner, and a companion in exploration. You lie down that night, exhausted but alive, imagining future races, not against neighbours, not even against other machines, but against wind, gravity, and your own imagination. The thrill lingers in your chest, the faint hum of engines in your mind, and you drift towards sleep with a quiet certainty. Racing the wind is less about speed and more about understanding motion, freedom, and the delightful absurdity of trying. The garage is tiny, so small that the air feels thick with possibility, oil, and a hint of last night's burnt wires. You squeeze in between a stack of tyres and a rickety workbench, fingers itching to touch everything. Every bolt, every gear, every discarded scrap of metal is a potential masterpiece waiting for your imagination. In here, the world shrinks to just you, your ideas, and the quiet hum of engines begging for attention. Light filters in through a cracked window, dust motes dancing like impatient little spirits. Outside, the streets of Hamamatsu hum softly with distant chatter and the occasional clatter of a bicycle or cart. Inside, time behaves differently. Minutes stretch lazily, allowing you to turn a gear over and over, test a chain, or experiment with an engine part that seems suspiciously alive. Every object holds a secret, a better connection, a faster spin, a smoother ride. Your hands are black with grease, but they feel purposeful. Each movement is deliberate, each tweak a conversation with the machine. A stubborn bolt refuses to budge, so you whisper to it gently, "I know you want to move. We can do this together." Somehow it works. The bolt twists free, and the gear spins a little smoother. You note it down in your mental notebook, a silent record of progress, triumph, and occasional absurdity. Sometimes the small garage feels like a miniature universe. Tires lean like sleepy giants against the walls, chains dangle like lazy vines, and engines rest quietly on shelves, humming in anticipation of attention. You move carefully among them, adjusting, testing, imagining, fully aware that one misstep could create chaos, or at the very least, a loud, slightly alarming noise. But chaos is part of invention, part of discovery, part of this quiet joy you have cultivated since childhood. You imagine the streets outside filled with machines like the ones you're building. Bicycles with small motors, carts that move effortlessly uphill, engines humming like tiny orchestras. You tweak the prototype again, adjusting the chain tension, lubricating the gears, and imagining the sound of a perfectly balanced engine spinning freely. Outside, a cat leaps gracefully over a fence, probably judging your obsession, and you laugh softly to yourself. Obsession, after all, is often indistinguishable from genius. Evenings are long, the sun dipping low, casting the garage in a warm amber glow. You step back and examine your latest contraption, noting the imperfections and planning future tweaks. Each day brings new ideas: a better suspension, a lighter frame, a throttle that responds just so. You scribble diagrams in a small notebook, occasionally adding absurd notes like, maybe it should sing when it moves, or consider tiny rocket boosters, probably not safe. Imagination thrives in these cramped quarters. Sometimes you pause to look at the engine, listening to the faint hum of potential. You feel a quiet pride. This small garage, this cramped, cluttered space, is where creation truly happens. You may not have room for grandeur, but you have everything you need: curiosity, patience, and a relentless desire to improve, tinker, and make the impossible tangible. Night falls, the streets quiet, and the moonlight filters softly through the dusty window. You lie on the floor briefly, fingers still smeared with grease, eyes tracing the outlines of gears and wheels in shadow. The small garage is alive with imagination, and in it anything is possible. Engines, bicycles, motorcycles, they are not just machines here. They are companions, teachers, and endless sources of joy. As you close your eyes, the faint hum of your mind echoes the rhythm of spinning wheels, and you drift to sleep surrounded by possibility. Innovation is not about size or wealth or recognition. In a small garage with blackened hands and a head full of dreams, you understand something profound. Greatness begins quietly, humbly, and entirely fueled by curiosity. It is a crisp morning in Hamamatsu, the air tinged with the faint smell of rice cooking and machinery oil. You arrive at the small factory where your prototype will finally meet the wider world. Your stomach churns with excitement and a little dread. Today is the day, the first big break. After years of tinkering, falling off bicycles, and whispering to engines in a dim garage, someone outside your own imagination will see your work. The factory smells of metal, hot grease, and ambition. Large machines stand like silent sentinels, waiting for hands clever enough to coax them into motion. You feel small amidst the hulking pistons, conveyor belts, and stacks of sheet metal, but also strangely at home. Each gear, each lever, each humming engine seems to nod at you, acknowledging that this is your moment. The prototype is wheeled onto the testing floor, a wobbly little marvel that has spent months perfecting itself in secret corners of your garage. You pat it gently, whispering a soft promise: "Don't fail me now." The engineers and observers gather, their eyes curious, their expressions neutral, or so they pretend. You sense skepticism in the air, the kind that tastes faintly of steamed buns and quiet doubt. This is normal. Skepticism is just the universe's way of saying, "Impress me, kid." The first attempt to start the engine is tense. You pull the lever, and the prototype shudders, coughs, and then roars, an ecstatic, wobbly roar that fills the room. It lurches forward, teetering dangerously, and you grab the handlebars instinctively, laughing and panicking at the same time. The observers murmur, leaning in. Some frown, some smile. The motorcycle wobbles, leans, and somehow stabilizes. It moves. It actually moves. You experiment with speed, adjusting a chain here, nudging a wheel there. The prototype responds in kind, like a small, obedient beast finally recognizing its master. It hums, rattles, and spins in a rhythm that feels like victory itself. You notice the faint grin of one of the engineers, a small acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, you're onto something. It's not perfection. Perfection never comes first. But it is proof, undeniable and thrilling, that your ideas work outside the walls of your tiny garage. Time stretches, each trial teaching something new. Wheels are adjusted, chains lubricated, and tiny bolts tightened. The observers begin asking questions, their skepticism fading into curiosity. You answer them simply, pointing to gears, explaining small mechanical marvels, and occasionally muttering under your breath about adjustments that will make it faster, lighter, smoother. The prototype listens, hums and responds as though it understands that this is its moment too. Lunch comes and goes. You barely notice. Every second is filled with observation, experimentation, and the quiet thrill of proving that ingenuity and persistence can move mountains, or at least small wobbly prototypes. A cat wanders into the factory at some point, startling a janitor and narrowly missing the spinning wheels, and you laugh quietly. Some things, it seems, are universally fascinated by machinery. By evening, the first big break is undeniable. The prototype has performed beautifully, wobbling only when appropriate, and moving with a confidence that surprises even you. Applause, small and polite, fills the room. You grin quietly, hands still black with grease, heart full of exhilaration. The world has noticed. Your ideas, nurtured in the small corners of a garage, have finally been witnessed outside your own imagination. As you wheel the prototype back to the garage that evening, the sun dipping low, you feel something profound. Validation, yes, but also the quiet thrill of potential. This is only the beginning. The first big break has not solved everything, perfected everything, or stopped the world from spinning chaotically beneath your feet. But it has proven one simple truth. Curiosity, persistence, and a little absurdity can carry a small boy's dreams further than he ever imagined. And as you lie down that night, grease still on your hands and the hum of the prototype echoing in your mind, you drift towards sleep with a quiet smile. The world is bigger now, possibilities more real, and tomorrow promises new experiments, new designs, and new adventures in motion. The morning is soft and hazy, sunlight spilling through the windows of your small workshop like a lazy cat stretching across the floor. You sit cross-legged beside your latest prototype, staring at it with a mixture of love and suspicion. Today, you know, is not about triumph. Today is about failure, the kind that smells faintly of burnt oil and hums with the quiet lessons of persistence. You pull the lever and the engine sputters. It coughs, chokes, and then gives a dramatic lurch that sends a small pile of tools clattering to the floor. You sigh, rubbing grease-stained hands over your face, and mutter something about the universe conspiring against you. Yet even as frustration bubbles, you notice something important. Each failure is not a wall, but a doorway. A hinge waiting to swing open. A whisper from the machine. Try again. The first attempt at motion ends in a spectacular wobble. Wheels spin unevenly, the chain derails, and a small metal bracket snaps with a sound reminiscent of a disgruntled bird. You stumble back, narrowly avoiding stepping on a stray wrench, and take a deep breath. Outside, a dog barks, perhaps mocking you, perhaps offering encouragement. Inside, the smell of burnt oil mingles with anticipation. You smile faintly. Failure is loud, messy, and oddly comforting. You kneel, fingers probing the stubborn engine, tracing the gears, the bolts, and the chain. Each imperfection is a puzzle. You rotate the wheel, inspect the tension, and adjust with painstaking care. Every minor success, a chain that clicks just right, a lever that moves smoothly, a bolt that finally tightens without protest, is a tiny victory, proof that progress lives in the details. Sometimes the failures are absurd. A wheel refuses to stay on its axle, a pedal falls off mid-adjustment, or the engine emits a smoke ring that curls like a lazy question mark. You laugh quietly, because what else can you do? The machines teach patience, humility, and the odd joy of unpredictability. You note each failure carefully, sketching diagrams, scribbling notes like a secret recipe for future triumphs. Hours pass unnoticed. The sun moves across the sky, casting long shadows that twist and stretch across the workshop. You wobble the prototype again, adjust a gear, nudge a lever, and observe how small changes ripple across the machine. It is delicate work, a dance between imagination and reality. Failure is not shameful here. It is a teacher, sometimes strict, sometimes absurdly whimsical, but always patient. By evening, the prototype has been through several iterations of small catastrophes. Wheels spin unevenly, chains slip, bolts protest. Yet somehow it moves, even if imperfectly. Each stumble has taught something new: better balance, smoother connections, a keener eye for tiny errors. You feel the quiet thrill of mastery creeping forward, almost imperceptible but persistent, a slow hum beneath the chaos. You pause to breathe, hands blackened and sore, and realize the truth. Invention is not linear. It is wobbly, unpredictable, full of moments that feel like disasters until they transform into understanding. Each failure is a step, each crash a whisper. Keep going. The world does not reward perfection. It rewards persistence, observation, and the willingness to touch the machine again, no matter how many sparks it throws at you. As night falls and the workshop grows quiet, you set the prototype aside, wiping grease from your hands and stretching tired muscles. The machines rest, shadows long and gentle, and you lie down on the tatami mat with a faint hum of satisfaction. Today, you did not succeed perfectly, but you learned. And in the world of engines, bicycles, and possibilities, learning from failure is the most important victory of all. It is a crisp morning in post-war Japan, and you stand in a small, cluttered workshop, sunlight filtering through dusty windows and illuminating the half-finished engines, wheels, and sketches scattered about. Today feels different. Today, all those years of tinkering, falling off bicycles, and whispering to engines have led to this singular moment, the birth of something bigger than yourself. Something that will one day carry people, dreams, and ideas across the country and eventually the world. The prototype sits before you, a wobbly, beautiful testament to persistence. You run your fingers along its frame, feeling every scratch, dent, and smudge. Each mark tells a story: late nights, failed experiments, small explosions, and moments of laughter. The engine hums softly, almost proudly, as if it knows today is its debut. You take a deep breath, savouring the mixture of grease, metal, and possibility in the air. You wheel the prototype outside, onto a quiet street where sunlight warms the pavement. Neighbours glance up from chores, some curious, some sceptical, all intrigued. The engine sputters once, twice, then roars to life with a tremulous but determined sound. The motorcycle lurches forward, wobbling slightly, but steadies itself. You ride it slowly at first, feeling every vibration, every hum of the engine beneath you. It moves, it really moves, and in that motion the idea of Honda is born, not just a machine, but a vision of what is possible when curiosity meets persistence. You imagine the future streets filled with motorcycles humming along, bicycles upgraded with tiny engines, and people moving with ease and freedom. The first small Honda carries a boy's imagination into reality, a vehicle powered not only by fuel, but by countless hours of dreaming, failing, and tinkering. Every turn of the wheel is a quiet declaration: innovation is alive, and you are its midwife. The first prototype attracts attention. Local mechanics, curious neighbours, and occasional officials peek over fences, eyebrows raised. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others nod quietly, recognizing the spark of genius. You answer questions simply, explaining gears, engines, and the delicate dance of balance. Sometimes you exaggerate for effect, describing the engine as a tiny roaring beast that obeys only the worthy. The audience chuckles, even if some are secretly worried about the engine throwing a small tantrum. Hours pass, though time feels elastic. You adjust the throttle, tweak the chain, and inspect the tyres, each small improvement a testament to the lessons of failure and experimentation. The prototype responds, shifting smoothly, humming like a small, compliant tiger. You realize that Honda is not just a company, a product, or a dream. It is the embodiment of curiosity, resilience, and the quiet absurdity of imagining things differently than everyone else. By evening, the first motorcycle rests in the workshop, its engine quietly purring. You sit beside it, hands greasy, eyes reflecting soft lamplight, and consider the journey from a curious boy in a small garage to this moment, a machine that moves, inspires, and promises more than just motion. It promises possibility. Night falls and the streets grow quiet. You lie down on your tatami mat, the faint hum of engines echoing in your mind. Honda has been born, not in grandeur, but in determination, imagination, and a small stubborn belief that even a boy from humble beginnings can move the world. The prototype sleeps, the garage sleeps, and you drift towards sleep, comforted by the knowledge that the first step has been taken and the journey has only just begun. The morning sun peeks through the thin curtains of your small workshop, casting long golden shadows across the floor. Outside, post-war Japan hums with quiet resilience. People rebuild houses, carts creak over uneven streets, and the faint smell of rice cooking drifts through the air. You stand amid scattered tools and blueprints, a small boy grown into a determined tinkerer, facing challenges that feel both enormous and absurd. The odds are high, the world skeptical, and yet something inside you refuses to yield. The motorcycles in your workshop seem to sense your determination. Engines hum softly, tyres rest like loyal companions, and the prototype you once feared to ride now waits patiently, as if acknowledging that you are ready to meet the world's skepticism head-on. You check each component meticulously, adjusting a chain here, tightening a bolt there, coaxing perfection from imperfection. You know that every small success today is a rebellion against the limitations others have imposed. Poverty, scarcity, and a world still recovering from conflict. Stepping outside, the streets feel alive with quiet judgment. Neighbours watch as you maneuver the prototype, wobbly at first but growing steadier with each pass. You imagine their thoughts. Will this kid ever succeed? Some doubt, some hope, and some quietly marvel at the audacity of trying. You smile to yourself. Doubt is inevitable. Hope is optional. Curiosity is essential. And persistence is non-negotiable. Each day presents challenges both practical and absurd. Supplies are limited, engines break unexpectedly, parts are lost or stolen, sometimes the wind seems to conspire against you. You shrug, wipe grease from your hands, and improvise. A bent piece of metal becomes a lever, a frayed wire finds a new purpose, and a discarded bicycle tyre turns into a makeshift test wheel. Invention, you have discovered, thrives not on perfection, but on creativity and stubbornness in the face of absurdity. The first small breakthroughs feel monumental. A smoother ride, a faster engine, a prototype that doesn't tip over at the first gust of wind. Each success is celebrated quietly, a small victory against the world that assumes you cannot succeed. You imagine engineers in Tokyo, investors in far-off cities, all skeptical and unprepared for the boy who turns scraps into dreams. And yet, each wheel turned, each bolt tightened, is proof that audacity, skill, and patience are often the most powerful engines of all. Evenings are long and quiet. You sit on the edge of the workshop, hands blackened, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the lantern. Outside, the world is still recovering, still suspicious of progress, still skeptical of a small boy trying to move mountains, or at least small motorcycles. But inside, the hum of potential vibrates in the air. The odds may be high, but the heart that drives curiosity, imagination, and persistence is higher. You think back to earlier days, to small failures, wobbly prototypes, and experiments that ended in soot and smoke. Every misstep has prepared you for this, the chance to rise against odds that seem insurmountable, to prove that ingenuity is not measured by resources, but by patience, observation, and the courage to try again. The world may be chaotic, sometimes cruel, sometimes absurd, but it is also full of opportunity for those willing to reach for it. As night falls and the streets grow quiet, you lie down on your tatami mat, prototype resting nearby, wheels humming softly like a lullaby. The odds are still high, the world skeptical, and the challenge is far from over. Yet tonight, you rest with a quiet sense of triumph, the audacity to rise, to continue, and to innovate against every expectation is itself a victory. And as sleep begins to claim you, the hum of engines and the whisper of possibilities echo in your mind, a gentle reminder that rising against odds is not about brute force. It is about persistence, imagination, and the quiet courage to keep turning wrenches in the dark. The morning air is crisp and tinged with the faint scent of metal, oil, and the promise of possibility. You stand before a small, modest building that is about to become your first factory, a place where imagination will meet reality on a larger scale. The walls are simple, the windows slightly crooked, and the floors creak underfoot. But to you, it is a palace of invention, a temple of tinkering, and a playground for ambition all rolled into one. Inside, the space smells of grease, freshly cut metal, and the faint hint of burnt coffee from the workers who have already arrived. The hum of activity is soft at first, like a lullaby of motion. You walk among stacks of wheels, engines, and partially assembled motorcycles, imagining each piece as a note in a symphony of creation. Every lever, chain, and bolt has its place, its purpose, and its moment to shine. You check each workstation, hands blackened with grease, fingers tracing the familiar grooves of engine parts as if greeting old friends. The workers glance at you curiously, some smiling, some skeptical. You greet them quietly, feeling a mixture of excitement and mild terror. This is not a garage anymore. This is a factory. And in a factory, mistakes are bigger, consequences louder, and triumphs infinitely more satisfying. The first test runs of the prototype motorcycles on the factory floor are chaotic yet magical. Engines sputter, wheels wobble, and sometimes a bolt falls off mid-run with a sound like a disgruntled bird. But gradually, each machine finds its rhythm. Chains click smoothly, engines roar confidently, and the hum of potential fills the air. You watch as ideas conceived in the corner of a small garage are transformed into tangible moving machines, capable of carrying people and dreams alike. Supplies arrive, sometimes late, sometimes in absurdly small quantities. You improvise, a bent lever here, a makeshift pulley there. The factory is alive with ingenuity, and every problem solved is a small victory, a quiet proof that creativity thrives under pressure. Workers begin to anticipate your moves, nodding knowingly when you make adjustments or call for a minor change. The prototype is no longer yours alone. It has become a shared vision, a collective obsession brought to life in a chorus of engines, grease, and quiet determination. Lunch breaks are short. The smell of rice, miso soup, and grilled fish mingles with the mechanical aroma of metal and oil. You sit briefly, wiping grease from your hands, eyes flicking to a prototype being carefully adjusted by one of the newer workers. Each glance, each observation, fills you with the quiet thrill of possibility. Every small success in this factory is a step towards something larger, a gentle confirmation that the spark of curiosity that started in a small garage can ignite an entire industry. By evening, the factory hums steadily, machines aligned, prototypes adjusted, and workers moving in a rhythm that is both organized and slightly absurd. You pause in the center of the floor, taking a deep breath, hands on your hips, and marvel at what has been created. A place where imagination has room to grow, where failure is a teacher, and where persistence transforms dreams into moving, humming machines. Night falls, and the factory is quiet except for the faint hum of engines left to rest for the evening. You walk slowly to the small office in the corner, fingers brushing against blueprints, sketches, and notes. You lie down briefly on a cot, exhausted but exhilarated. The first factory is not perfect, not grand, not shiny, but it is alive with possibility, with motion, and with the quiet magic of invention. As sleep draws near, the faint echo of engines reverberates softly in your mind. You drift off with the comforting thought that this small factory, built from determination, grease, and imagination, is the beginning of something extraordinary. Here, in this humble building, the wheels of Honda begin to turn, quietly, persistently, and with the promise of motion that will one day span the world. The factory is quiet tonight, not silent, never silent, but hushed, like it's thinking. You walk slowly between rows of finished motorcycles, your footsteps soft on the concrete floor. Engines sit patiently, cooling after a long day of work, their metal ticking faintly as if whispering secrets to one another. This is the sound of ambition resting, not sleeping. You pause beside one of the bikes and rest a hand on the seat. It's warm, not just from the engine, but from effort, from intention. And suddenly, your thoughts drift beyond the walls of the factory, beyond Hamamatsu, beyond Japan itself. You imagine roads you've never seen, people you've never met, and machines you haven't built yet, moving through cities that exist only as ideas in your mind. The international dream begins quietly. There is no dramatic announcement, no flag unfurled, no trumpet fanfare. Just a thought that slips in while you're tightening a bolt. What if this worked somewhere else? What if these machines rolled down unfamiliar streets, under unfamiliar skies, carrying unfamiliar people who don't know your name, but trust your engine? At first, the idea feels ridiculous. You laugh softly to yourself. International? You're still figuring out how to keep chains from squeaking and engines from overheating in summer. You barely have enough parts for tomorrow's production run, let alone a global empire. But the thought lingers. It hums, just like the engines do before they start. Quiet, steady, persistent. You imagine American roads, long, open, stretching endlessly forward like an invitation. You picture Europeans weaving through narrow streets that predate common sense. You wonder if people everywhere curse stubborn bolts the same way you do. Probably. Some things are universal. There are obstacles, of course. Regulations, shipping costs, cultural skepticism. You picture customs officials squinting suspiciously at crates labelled motorcycle parts and wondering why everything smells faintly of optimism and engine oil. You imagine translators struggling to explain why your design choices make sense, even when they look slightly unhinged on paper. Still, the dream grows legs. Very reliable, well-engineered legs. You begin thinking differently, designing machines not just for local roads, but for the world. You consider durability, ease of repair, simplicity. You think about people who just want something that works, starts every morning, and doesn't demand a philosophical commitment. Late at night, you sketch quietly. Not blueprints this time, but ideas. Smaller engines, lighter frames, bikes that don't intimidate first-time riders, machines that feel friendly, approachable, like a handshake instead of a challenge. You realize that going international isn't about being the loudest or fastest. It's about being dependable. Outside, the factory windows reflect your tired face back at you. You look older than you feel and younger than your ambitions. The world is big, vast, slightly terrifying. But you've learned something important over the years. Machines behave better when you respect them. Maybe the world works the same way. As you leave the factory, locking the door behind you, the night air is cool and calm. The international dream doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It simply walks beside you, quietly confident, like an engine idling patiently at a red light, ready when you are. You lie down later, the faint echo of imagined roads humming in your mind. Somewhere far away, people you haven't met yet are waiting for machines they don't know they need. You smile sleepily. The world is large, but tonight it feels reachable. The world is bigger than you imagined, louder too. You discover this the moment your motorcycles arrive overseas, crates opened under unfamiliar skies by people who squint at your machines like they're trying to solve a polite but confusing riddle. You stand there, jet-lagged, hopeful, and mildly terrified, watching your dream attempt to introduce itself to the planet. At first, things seem promising. The engines start. That's good. They move forward. Also good. But then, the problems begin to whisper, and then they stop whispering. The roads are different here. Longer, faster, meaner. Your small, efficient engines, perfect for Japan's narrow streets, sound a little nervous when pushed for hours at high speed. Bolts loosen. Oil leaks in places oil should never leak. One engine overheats so dramatically it smells like it's actively offended by the concept of America. You nod politely while mechanics explain what's wrong, even though you already know. The motorcycles weren't built for this yet. They're hard-working, loyal, and determined. But they're underprepared, like someone showing up to a marathon in very optimistic sandals. Reviews come in. They are not gentle. Words like underpowered and fragile float through conversations. Someone politely suggests your bikes are interesting, which you learn is international code for "we are deeply concerned." You smile, bow slightly, and absorb every criticism like a sponge soaked in disappointment and valuable information. At night, you lie awake replaying the failures. Every rattle, every complaint, every raised eyebrow. The international dream stumbles, not catastrophically but publicly, and that's worse. Failing quietly is one thing. Failing in front of the entire world is quite another. But here's the strange part. You're not discouraged. Exhausted, yes. Embarrassed, absolutely. But beneath the fatigue is something familiar. This feels like the garage again, like broken prototypes, like chains slipping and bolts snapping. You recognize this moment for what it is. Feedback. Loud, expensive feedback. You take notes, so many notes, about heat tolerance, about endurance, about expectations. You listen more than you talk. You watch how people ride, how they treat machines, how they expect engines to behave. You realize something quietly profound. You didn't fail because you aimed too high. You failed because you haven't learned enough yet. Back home, the factory feels different, quieter, more serious. You gather your team and explain, calmly, honestly, what went wrong. No excuses, no dramatics, just facts. Engines must be stronger. Parts must last longer. Machines must survive abuse, neglect, and the occasional rider who treats maintenance as a rumour. The factory responds the way it always does, with motion. New designs emerge, stronger frames, better cooling, engines that don't panic when asked to work all day. Failure on the world. Stage sharpens everything. The mistakes sting, but they clarify. Late one evening, you walk alone through the factory floor. The machines are silent, but they feel different now, steadier, wiser. You rest a hand on a new engine casing and feel confidence humming beneath the metal. Not arrogance, not bravado, just quiet readiness. As you lie down that night, the embarrassment fades, replaced by resolve. The world said no, not forever, just not yet. And you drift towards sleep knowing something important. The greatest advantage you have isn't talent or luck. It's your comfort with failure. After all, you've been fixing broken things your entire life. The factory wakes up before the sun does. Lights flicker on one by one, illuminating rows of machines that now feel judgmental. Not angry, just quietly expectant. You stand in the middle of the floor, hands on your hips, realizing something important. Everything you thought was finished is suddenly very unfinished. This isn't panic, this is familiarity. You've been here before, many times. Back in the garage, back with the broken chains, back with the engines that coughed like they had opinions. Redesigning everything again doesn't feel like defeat. It feels like routine. You start with the engine. Always the engine. You take it apart slowly, respectfully, like you're apologizing for asking it to do things it was never designed to do. Pistons come out. Valves are inspected. Cooling systems get a long, hard stare. You mutter softly to yourself, asking questions no one else can hear. What if it breathed better? What if it ran cooler? What if it didn't give up halfway through a long American highway like a tired toddler? The answer, as usual, is not one big change, but 1,000 small ones. Slightly thicker metal here, better airflow there. A redesign so subtle it looks identical to the old version unless you know where to look. And you do. You always do. The team gathers around sketches and prototypes, sipping tea that has long since given up on being hot. Everyone looks tired, but focused. No one complains. There's a shared understanding in the room. This is how progress works. You fail, you learn, you rebuild, then you rebuild again because the first rebuild was optimistic. Parts are tested until they beg for mercy. Engines run longer, harder, louder. Some protest, some survive. You quietly retire the weak ones without ceremony. There's no sentimentality in engineering, only respect. If a part can't endure reality, it doesn't belong in the future. Days blur together. Night shifts become normal. You fall asleep thinking about airflow and wake up thinking about torque. Someone suggests a design that's simpler, stronger, and cheaper all at once. You stare at it in silence, then nod slowly. Those are your favourite moments, the ones where brilliance arrives disguised as common sense. Failures still happen, of course. A redesigned engine overheats. A new frame vibrates like it's nervous about its responsibilities. You sigh, jot down notes, and adjust again. There's no drama, no despair, just iteration. Calm, stubborn iteration. Eventually, something changes. The engines sound different. Not louder, not faster, steadier, confident. They run longer without complaint. They forgive neglect. They tolerate mistakes. They feel grown up. You test the new machines relentlessly. Long rides, heavy loads, heat, cold, dust, rain. If a bike survives everything you can throw at it, it might survive the world. Late one evening, you shut down the last engine and stand quietly in the sudden silence. The factory smells like oil and progress. You're exhausted, but peaceful. Redesigning everything again didn't break you, it refined you. As you lie down later, your mind finally slows. The machines are resting, the ideas are resting, and for the first time since the world said no, you feel ready to ask again. Trust does not arrive all at once. It doesn't crash through the door or announce itself loudly. It shows up slowly, cautiously, like a cat that has been disappointed before. You know this now as you watch your redesigned motorcycles roll out of the factory, engines humming with a new kind of confidence. Not excitement, reliability. The first riders are cautious. They kick the tires. They squint at the engine. They ask the same questions over and over, just phrased differently. Will it start every morning? Will it survive long rides? Will it embarrass me in front of my friends? You nod calmly. You don't oversell. You let the machine speak. And the machine does speak. It starts. Every time. It runs longer. It runs cooler. It doesn't complain when pushed hard or neglected slightly. It forgives. Riders notice this. Mechanics notice it first, actually. They stop seeing your bikes in the shop for catastrophic failures and start seeing them only for routine maintenance. This is how trust begins, quietly, in greasy back rooms, with raised eyebrows and slow nods. Word spreads, not through flashy advertisements, but through conversations. Someone tells a friend, "It just works." Another says, "I tried to break it, I couldn't." These are not poetic endorsements, but they are powerful. You smile when you hear them. Engines don't need praise, they need respect. You visit dealerships and repair shops, listening more than talking. You ask what breaks, what rattles, what annoys people after a year of ownership. You write everything down. Riders are surprised by this. They're used to companies pretending nothing is wrong. You find that admitting imperfections builds more trust than denying them ever could. The motorcycles keep doing their job. Day after day. Rain, heat, dust, long commutes, short errands. They become part of people's routines, which is the highest honor any machine can achieve. No one brags about them. No one fears them. They are simply there, reliable, patient, unremarkable in the most remarkable way. You realize something important. Trust is cumulative. Every engine that doesn't fail adds a grain of belief. Every rider who gets home safely adds another. Over time, the pile grows. There are still skeptics, of course. There always are. You don't chase them. You let time handle that. Time and engines that refuse to quit. Late one evening, you walk through the factory again. The machines hum steadily, like a heartbeat you can finally relax into. You remember the early days, the failures, the skepticism, the embarrassment. Winning trust was never about convincing people with words. It was about proving yourself repeatedly, patiently, without demanding applause. As you lie down that night, the idea of trust settles gently around you. Not dramatic, not fragile, solid, like an engine that starts in the cold without complaint. You drift towards sleep knowing this. Trust isn't built by being perfect. It's built by showing up, working properly, and doing what you promised, one engine at a time. Something strange starts happening. You hear your company's name spoken in places you've never been. Quietly, casually, like it's always been there. A mechanic in a faraway city mentions it without ceremony. A rider recommends it to a friend. Someone calls it reliable and means it as a compliment, not an excuse. You don't throw a party. You don't put up banners. You tighten a bolt. Because that's how this kind of success arrives. Not loudly, but persistently. Honda begins appearing on roads all over the world, not as a symbol of luxury or rebellion or speed, but as something far more dangerous: dependability. People trust it with their commutes, their deliveries, their workdays. Your machines don't shout, they hum. They blend into daily life until they're almost invisible, which is exactly what makes them indispensable. You visit factories overseas and feel slightly disoriented. Everything looks familiar, but slightly off, like a dream where your house is on the wrong side of the street. The machines are larger now, the floors cleaner, the scale bigger. But the philosophy remains stubbornly the same. Build it well. Make it simple. Respect the person who has to fix it later. Executives start asking about branding, image, dominance. You nod politely and ask how the engines are performing. This confuses them. You consider it a good sign. A company that forgets what it builds is already halfway to breaking it. You walk through a warehouse filled with finished machines bound for places you once only imagined. Africa, Europe, the Americas. They sit quietly in rows, identical yet destined for completely different lives. Some will be used gently, some will be abused terribly, some will be loved, some will be forgotten. Your job is to make sure they all survive regardless. You think back to the international failure, the embarrassment, the redesigns, the nights spent worrying whether you were chasing the wrong dream. Becoming a global name wasn't about conquering markets. It was about earning space in people's lives without demanding attention. The world begins to associate your name with trust, not spectacle. That's rare and powerful and deeply boring to explain at dinner parties, but you wouldn't have it any other way. Late at night, alone in your office, you flip through reports you barely glance at. Sales numbers rise, markets expand. You set the papers down and stare out the window instead. Growth is nice. But what matters more is that somewhere, someone is turning a key and expecting an engine to start, and it does. As you prepare for sleep, the idea settles in gently. You became global by refusing to act important, by obsessing over small details, by caring deeply about things most people never notice unless they fail. The hum of distant factories echoes softly in your thoughts. Not loud, not demanding, just steady. And you drift off knowing that the greatest compliment your machines will ever receive is silence, because silence means they're working exactly as they should. Failure no longer startles you. It doesn't shout or slam doors. It clears its throat politely and waits for you to notice it. You've spent enough time together that it feels less like an enemy and more like an inconvenient co-worker who somehow keeps being right. You walk through the factory floor with unhurried steps, listening. Engines hum. Conveyors move. Somewhere, something is slightly off. You can feel it, not emotionally, but mechanically. A vibration where there shouldn't be one, a rhythm that's almost right. This is where failure lives now, in the details. You stop beside a test engine and let it run. Too warm. Not dangerously so, just enough to whisper, "Pay attention." You nod, as if thanking it. Machines don't fail out of spite. They fail because they're telling the truth. About limits, about physics, about optimism that went a little too far. You've learned to respect that honesty. Early on, failure felt personal, like an insult, like proof you weren't enough. Now it feels instructional, neutral, almost kind. It doesn't mock you. It just hands you information, usually wrapped in smoke. You encourage your engineers to fail often, but carefully. Test things until they break, then break them again. Failure caught early is polite. Failure caught late is expensive and loud and humiliating. Everyone laughs softly at this because they've lived it. There are whiteboards covered in notes, arrows pointing nowhere, diagrams that look like abstract art. Somewhere in the middle of the chaos is clarity. Failure helps you find it by eliminating what doesn't work. one idea at a time. You think back to the garage, to chains slipping, engines coughing, dreams stalling. None of it was wasted. Every mistake trained your instincts. Every broken part taught you restraint. You stopped asking, "Can we do this?" and started asking, "Should we?" The world sees polished machines now, finished products, but you see the invisible history of failures inside every one of them. They're layered, like sediment, quiet, structural, necessary. Late in the evening, you sit alone with a cup of tea that has gone cold. You don't mind. Cold tea doesn't fail. It simply becomes something else. You smile at that thought. You realize your philosophy of failure is simple. Don't fear it, don't ignore it, and don't romanticize it. Just listen. Failure is information. Sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes inconvenient, always useful. As you lie down to sleep, the idea settles over you like a blanket. The world doesn't need perfection. It needs things that work, and people willing to learn when they don't. Engines rest. Ideas rest. Even failure takes the night off. And you drift gently into sleep, knowing that tomorrow, if something breaks, you'll know exactly what to do. You would think that after building a global reputation for reliability, you might relax, sit back, enjoy consistency, maybe take up a quiet hobby like gardening or sleeping. But no. Instead, you look at racing, the loudest, fastest, most chaotic version of motorcycling, and think, yes, that seems sensible. Racing is not about reliability. Racing is about pushing machines far past the point where they politely ask you to stop. Engines scream. Parts vibrate themselves loose out of spite. Everything runs hot, fast, and slightly angry. Naturally, you're fascinated. You walk through a racetrack paddock, the air thick with fuel, rubber, and bravado. Other teams glance at your machines skeptically. Honda, the reliable commuter bike people? That Honda? You smile calmly. Skepticism has always been your favorite fuel. The first races are educational. Engines fail spectacularly. Parts that behaved beautifully on the street disintegrate under racing pressure. Something vibrates itself apart mid-lap and scatters across the track like mechanical confetti. You take notes, so many notes. Racing doesn't lie. It exaggerates weaknesses until they're impossible to ignore. You discover quickly that racing is failure on fast forward. Every problem arrives sooner, louder, in front of an audience. It's humiliating and perfect. If a machine survives racing, it will survive anything short of intentional abuse. Your engineers look tired, excited, slightly concerned for your mental health. You insist on pushing harder, more speed, more stress, higher limits. Someone gently asks if this is necessary. You respond by pointing at a broken engine and saying, "That's how we learn where the edge is." The risks are real. Crashes happen, machines break. The margin for error shrinks to nothing. You feel the weight of responsibility settle heavily on your shoulders. Racing isn't just mechanical, it's human. Riders trust your machines with their lives. That thought sharpens your focus immediately. Slowly, improvements appear. Stronger materials, better airflow, components that don't panic under pressure, engines that scream but don't self-destruct. The machines evolve. So do you. Racing teaches decisiveness. There's no time for hesitation at 150 miles per hour. Other teams begin to take notice. Honda isn't just present anymore. It's competitive. Not dominant yet, but serious. Respect grows quietly, grudgingly, the best kind. Late one evening, you stand alone near the track, the air cooling, engines finally silent. You watch the empty asphalt and feel oddly calm. Racing looks insane from the outside, and it is, but it sharpens everything. It strips away comfort. It demands excellence. As you prepare for sleep later, the echoes of engines fade into a gentle hum in your mind. Racing didn't distract you from your philosophy, it reinforced it. Push limits, learn fast, respect failure. You drift off knowing something important. Sometimes to build machines people trust at slow speeds, you have to test them where everything moves impossibly fast. At some point, without a formal announcement, you realize the company no longer fits entirely inside your head. It's too big now. Too many factories. Too many people. Too many ideas humming at once. You walk through the halls and notice something both comforting and unsettling. Things are working even when you're not directly involved. This is leadership, apparently. You sit in meetings and listen more than you speak. Younger engineers argue passionately about designs, improvements, risks. They remind you of yourself, except better rested and with fewer burn scars. You smile quietly and let them debate. The best ideas don't need rescuing. Your role has shifted. You are no longer tightening bolts. You are setting tone. You ask questions instead of giving answers. What happens if this fails? Who fixes this in 10 years? Would you trust this with your own commute? The room grows thoughtful. Good. Thoughtfulness scales better than ego. You walk through factories you didn't design, in cities you once only imagined. Workers nod respectfully. Some know your name, many just know the standards you insist on. You prefer it that way. A legacy shouldn't depend on personal supervision. It should survive absence. At night you reflect on how strange it is to step back from something you built piece by piece. Letting go feels unnatural at first, like loosening your grip on a moving machine. But you remind yourself, control is not the same as care. Trusting others to carry the vision forward is not weakness. It's the final test of whether the vision was real. You still visit the factory floor sometimes, quietly, unannounced. You watch how people work when they don't think they're being watched. You notice habits. You notice pride. You notice when someone stops a production line because something feels wrong. That's when you know the philosophy has taken root. Legacy, you realize, is not about being remembered. It's about being embedded in processes, in instincts, in standards that outlive explanations. It's about machines that still work long after people forget who designed them. Leadership, meanwhile, turns out to be less about authority and more about restraint. Knowing when to step in, knowing when to step back, knowing when silence is more helpful than instruction. You learn that the hardest part isn't starting something, it's leaving it capable. As evening settles, you sit quietly with a cup of tea and listen to the distant hum of a company that no longer needs constant supervision. The sound is steady, reassuring, familiar. When you lie down to sleep, the thought arrives gently. You didn't build something fragile, you built something resilient, something that can change, adapt, and even disagree with you. And that, you realize as sleep takes over, might be the greatest success of all. The world is loud now. Engines roar across continents. Factories hum day and night. Roads are filled with motion, commutes, deliveries, adventures, small daily errands that add up to millions of lives moving forward. Somewhere in that noise is your work, woven so deeply into the background that most people never stop to think about it. And that feels right. You sit quietly, far from the factory floor, listening not to engines but to the softer sounds of life. Wind through trees, a distant bicycle bell, footsteps on pavement. You think back to a boy who once crouched beside broken machines, hands too small, dreams too large, wondering how things worked. That boy didn't want to be loud. He just wanted things to move properly. It's strange how the loudest impact can come from the quietest persistence. You never shouted your way into history. You tinkered. You listened. You failed repeatedly and adjusted calmly. While others chased spectacle, you chased improvement measured in millimeters and degrees and minutes of engine life. The world noticed eventually, but not all at once. It noticed when machines didn't break, when mornings started reliably, when long journeys ended safely. You didn't demand attention, you earned trust, and trust, you've learned, speaks more loudly than marketing ever could. You walk past a street and hear an engine idle smoothly at a red light. Someone checks their watch unconcerned. They trust the machine. They trust it will start again when the light turns green. That trust traces all the way back to a quiet boy who didn't accept good enough as an answer. There are moments when people ask you how it feels to have changed the world. You pause. You think. You answer honestly. You didn't change it. You just made it a little easier to move through. And maybe that's enough. The loud world keeps spinning. Faster now, more complicated, more demanding. But somewhere beneath it all is a simple philosophy humming steadily. Observe carefully, improve patiently, respect failure, and never underestimate the power of small, consistent effort. As night settles in, you lie down and let the noise fade. Engines quiet in your imagination, becoming a low, steady rhythm instead of a roar. The loud world carries on without needing your attention anymore. It doesn't mean you're irrelevant, it means you succeeded. You drift towards sleep knowing that long after the noise changes, long after trends fade and names blur, machines built with care will still be doing their quiet work, moving people forward without asking for applause. And somewhere inside all of that motion remains the quiet boy, listening closely, hands slightly greasy, perfectly content to let the world be loud while he rests.